little rabbit trail here, a little story. I used to teach Christian ethics at I did it at a Bible college and at a Christian college, which happened to be a Catholic school in Wisconsin. And I loved Abortion Day. This gives you a little insight into my personality. You say, well, how in the world could you love Abortion Day? Because I knew I would get to torment students on that day like I don't get to torment them on any other day. So what I would do is I'd go in and I'd say, hey, it's Abortion Day today. We're going to talk about abortion, Christian ethics. How many of you, and again, these are Christian schools, so I'd say, how many of you are pro-life? Like every hand goes up, which of course is predictable. And I would say, why? And they would, they'd look at you again like you got two heads. We're Christians, and they'd go back and forth. And eventually somebody would say, well, life is sacred. And I'd say, why? And then somebody would wind up in Genesis 1:26, and they'd say, well, because humanity is made in the image of God. And I would say, well, what does that mean? And then I would get the grocery list. See, that's what I'm waiting for, is the grocery list. If you read a lot of your theologians, what I'm going to tell you is my view, is not a new view. It's, again, Mike never had an original idea. But there are good exegetical reasons for it. But this is the grocery list. They would say things like, whoa, consciousness, self-awareness, sentience, the ability to pray, the ability to commune with God, emotions, having a soul or a spirit. Theologians land somewhere in here. And I would say, well, thank you for making a biblical pro-choice argument for me. And then they'd really look at you. And they're like, what? What do you mean? They'd be like my pug, like, what? Okay. Why do these things fail? Because they cannot be said to be present equally among all human beings. You go back to the list. Does everybody have the same level of intelligence? Emotional aptitude? Is everybody's conscience the same? What about people in a coma? Do they lose the image? They're no longer conscious. I mean, you can just go down, you can pick off every one of these. If we even expand it to the animal kingdom, there's a whole field in psychology called animal cognition, which is actually fun to read. It's something I'm interested in, not because I have pugs. I don't know where pugs rank on this. But I remember reading a study one time where chickens scored better than toddlers on an intelligence test. And we have a chicken at home. Why do we have a chicken? I don't know. Okay. But if you let the chicken out, it knows at night to go roost somewhere, where it's safe. Like it'll go back home. You want to do that with your toddler? Okay. That was the test. So animal intelligence, I mean, none of these work. They're not possessed equally among all humans. They can't be said to be actually present among all humans at different stages of human development, and some aren't even unique to mankind. All these are connected to brain function, except for soul and spirit. We'll get to that in a moment. But you see what I mean? The little, 4-6-celled zygote, the thing that attaches itself to the wall of the uterus, that ain't praying to God. That's not having a single thought. It doesn't have a brain. It's not communing with the supernatural, with the Almighty. And then somebody in the audience in my ethics class would say, well, it will. I said, thank you. Now we have potential persons. That's a pro-choice argument. And then you'd get, I'm going to tell my pastor. After this class, I'm going to call my mom. I'm going to go to the dean. And it's like, look, they know what day it is. They're expecting you. Just go ahead. This is every semester. Okay, they get it. And I would tell them, look, I'm doing this to you because I don't want someone who is hostile to your faith to do it to you. Because they will destroy you. Okay? It would take 5 minutes to destroy you. And some would enjoy it. I mean, these ideas make you vulnerable. What about soul and spirit? Well, the Hebrew word for soul is nephesh. Guess what? Animals have that in Genesis 2:7. So that's not unique to humans. Genesis 1:21, another verse. Animals have that. Every living creature, nephesh hachaya, living creature. See, it's obscured in your English translations. You don't know that's the word for soul, but it is. They also have a ruach, the word for spirit. Ecclesiastes 3:21, it just refers to animate life. There's animate life, and then there's like plant life, okay? Man, what about the nishmat hayim, the breath of life? Well, that's nice. Genesis 7:22 and 23 attributes that to all land animals as well. Again, it would take 5 minutes. So what is, okay, inevitably I'd get, okay, smart guy, what is it? They'd get angry. And I'd say, I'm glad you asked the question, because it's important. So God created man in his own image, is how most translations have this. I'm going to suggest that we need to think of the image as a function or role rather than a quality or attribute inside a person. Because those qualities and attributes are not unique. Humans don't possess them equally. And in some cases, they can be perceived as being even lost, again, like the coma situation. The image is something that's a function. Let me illustrate in English. If I say, believe it or not, this is really about that little preposition in. In Hebrew, it's be, the letter bet. Bet salem, in the image, okay? If I say, put the dishes in the sink, the word in denotes what? Location. It's in the sink. If I say, I wrote the letter in pencil, now I'm not talking about location. I'm not using that little preposition to denote location. I'm talking about the instrument I used to do some writing, the tool. It has a totally different semantic, totally different meaning. If I say, I broke the vase in pieces, I'm not talking about instrument now or location. I'm talking about some result of some action that I did. Okay, try this one. If I say, I work in medicine, I work in ministry, I work in accounting, I work in education, what do I mean? It means I work as a doctor, a PA, a nurse. I work as a pastor, somebody, a staff person, some ministerial function of any kind, any type. I work as an accountant. I work as a principal, a teacher, an administrator, whatever. It describes function or role. That is what Genesis 1:26 is getting at. Now, I could take you into the Hebrew grammar and talk about the bet of predication, the bet essentia, and all that fancy Latin grammar stuff. This is a known category for the meaning of in, function. How does it work out practically? Try to think of it as a verb rather than a noun. Every human being is an imager of God. God's original intent was to create creatures like him, to essentially be him as if he were there. They are his proxy. They are his representative, his agent to do things. Every human being is an imager of God. Another way to illustrate this is to go to one of the 10 Commandments. This is a familiar one. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Now, we are sort of taught to think that this commandment is about swearing, the verbal utterance of God's name in some defamatory or, useless way. I want you to see something, again, that's obscured in English. Take is the Hebrew verb nasa, and I'm going to do Just bear with me here. I'm going to run a quick search just to show you a point. This is often the term, you'll look at the options over here, that is translated to bear, to carry, to support, to lift. Okay, it's a verb that means all those things. Lift, carry, take up, pick up, that sort of thing, to bear. Thou shalt not bear the name of the Lord thy God in vain. What does it mean to bear a name? It means to be associated with it. I bear the name Christian. I bear the name, like Logos employee. I am an extension of that name. I'm responsible for its reputation. Okay? To bear the name means to be a representative of that name. But the New Testament expresses this really nicely when Paul tells Peter, let everyone who names the name of Christ depart from iniquity. Imaging God and bearing the name are two related concepts. It's really two ways of saying the same thing. Humanity was the representative of God, was the agent of God on earth. To be human is to be the image of God. It doesn't matter if you're a few cells in a woman's womb. It doesn't matter if you're old and you've lost your memory. It doesn't matter if you're in a coma. If you are human, you are God's imager. End of story. It doesn't matter what race, what income level. I mean, look at all the ways our culture divides people up into groups. I mean, we live in a day when the best word for it is tribalism. It's like we all want to be in these little tribes, and then they fight with each other constantly. That is so chaotically contrary to God's vision for humanity, and the fact that God actually tells you how He looks at people. Every person God looks at as His representation. They are Him, as it were, on earth. Now that gets ruined by the fall. We enter into rebellion. We have the problem of sin. We are all in rebellion, and we need to be brought back into the family of God, where we can actually function like God wants us to do, and we can actually represent Him well, the way He wants things done. But every person you bump into is a potential candidate. Candidate's not a really good word, but every person you bump into is an estranged family member who was created for a specific reason, and that is to image God, to participate with God, to complete the tasks God wants, to give the earth the kind of life God wants people to have. It all goes back to Genesis 1, to this concept of imaging. Bearing the name, representation. Again, in a fallen world, the redeemed are the ones who can do this as intended, and we're all estranged from God. Thankfully, we have a template. It's no coincidence that imaging language is used of Jesus. Again, it's not like a lucky correlation. Oh, Paul got lucky. He used the word image a few times. I bet he wasn't thinking about Genesis 1. I bet he was. I bet he was thinking about representation of God. The God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. He's the perfect image. He is the perfect representative. If you've seen me, Jesus said, you have seen the Father.